If you think of all description of near-death experience, Saul on the road to Damascus and his epiphany, described in terms of light, samadhi, or the light-filled void, enlightenment. All these things have to do with this vocabulary of light.
The light of mankind.
Yes, and also in the beginning there was light. We think about light in those terms, so it does arrest us. It does stop us, just like it does the deer. And we have that strong relationship to light. We are heliotropic. People tend to think about vacations, in the light.
I don't know what heliotropic means.
We respond or orient to Helios, the sun. In thinking about the meeting house here, I remember thinking when I was young about my grandmother and her relationship, because she was the strongest who had the relationship to a religion or to a faith, and was the one who took me often to the meeting. And she always said, "You go inside to greet the light." So this meeting of the light inside was something that was very important. And I can remember trying to figure out what that meant and what I was to do. And I also remember thinking when I was a child, what about the meeting house, how I would like it. My thinking of sitting there, often I would think of what it would be like if the roof were off. Kind of, it's like a child thinking, well, what if this were a convertible? And so that's actually what I used to think about, because I used to think about this idea of cielo, or the heavens, or the sky, and the relationship of sky to the idea of heavens. And I just thought, this would be kind of terrific if it had no roof.
I'd never thought about it before, but that about light that calms kids down is part of what happens here when people come, and they're animated when they first get here and everyone's talking, and then they settle down and just look at the light.
Well, it is something that has an emotional impact that doesn't get talked about too much in art criticism. But also it has a physical situation too. First of all, remember, we drink light as vitamin D through the skin. So through the skin we actually make vitamin D. So light's a food. That's the physical part of it. It's part of our diet. And then we have a strong emotional relationship to light as well. It really does have this amazing effect on us. And then the third quality is this spiritual quality. Now, people often saying, you're involved in an art that's spiritual. Could be, but I'm not going to worry about that, because if you look at the history of art, if you look at Vermeer with light, if you look at Turner, Constable, you look at Rembrandt, you look at all the Impressionists, and not to mention Goya and Velázquez, there is this dealing with light. So this fits right into it. I just have sort of an American view of deciding to, instead of using paint to depict light, I actually am using light, which seems like a little bit more direct to me. And I'm very interested in that. I'm also interested in our primal relation to it. Just the same way that you see a deer that gets frozen by the headlights of a car and hit by the car, we have that same relation to light when we look into a fire. And it tends to engender this thinking. It's not a thinking with words, but it's still thinking. So this kind of wordless thought of the theta state, we kind of drift off as we look into campfire or a fire in the fireplace. And so this is our primal relationship to light. So I want to keep that. So rather than put content in it, that is with an image, I leave that out.
Last night we were at Rice, and that was a very different experience from being here. It was colored light and it changed. And this is white and static. Now they're two very different experiences.
Well, I started out with the early sky spaces where I made our light stay the same. So you didn't notice it when it was day, but as the sky diminished, then our light became more prominent on the inside. At Rice, for instance, is quite different. I'm not only working the light on the inside, which is changing, but the light, of course, on the outside is changing. So I change it in response to the light outside. Many people are quite unaware of the fact that we make the color of the sky. We give it its color. We always think that it's something we receive, that all perception is something that comes to us. And because we think that, it's very easy then to change the color of the sky. I mean, obviously I'm not changing the color of the sky, I'm just changing the context of vision.
I read once that the average time someone spends looking at a painting at the Met is 15 seconds. And people come here and spend over an hour looking at your work.
Well, we do have a mass culture, and we do want to make things in art not just for the elite. So we have to have a way to show these things. The work I make tends to take longer to kind of grasp or feel or experience. But, you know, if it's not enough, I'll make more, make another one. So that's generally how I've approached it. Actually, this is just perfect. In other words, the height of this. You can put your head back on this, you'll notice. In fact, I could remember at one time thinking as I was making these places, you know, in Argentina and Tasmania and top of Norway and in Mexico and Yucatan, I was beginning to think that, you know, as a mid-career artist, my career is kind of going nowhere. But now, having done all these pieces in different places, I realized that if you find yourself in the middle of nowhere, you're probably somewhat near my work.